All right, the 8 o'clock advisory is in, and here it is. The intensity, the same 175 miles an hour, still moving west-northwest at 16. The pressure is down. Sometimes could be an indication of strengthening, certainly something that we don't want to see.
Turks and Caicos right in the line of fire right there.
Right.
It hasn't made that move yet.
No, that's Saturday night. We're 48 hours away from that.
Okay, well, we'll all be watching with much anticipation.
Absolutely.
The cone of uncertainty remains the same. We talk about the areas of most likelihood, not really something to worry yourself with. It's that cone that you need to worry with, and that means everybody in the Florida Peninsula. Everybody, from coast to coast, from Naples to Fort Lauderdale, from Charlotte County all the way over to all of the beaches on the East Coast. Rick, that slight change in what they think is going to happen is interesting.
It is interesting. Well, here's the deal. We've been saying for a couple of days that we don't know where that right-hand turn is going to take place, which means anybody across the Florida Peninsula needs to watch this. Now, last couple of model runs have been kind of consistent on the eastern side of Florida. You get a little bit of confidence. And then here's what changed. The European model, this is probably the best model that we have when we forecast these things. So there's a lot of deference paid to this. So take a look at what happens with this latest model run on this. Goes a little bit to the south, maybe a little bit of interaction here with Cuba, and makes that right-hand turn a little bit later, which puts the center of this right here Sunday morning, 5 a.m., making landfall somewhere around the Keys instead of somewhere over here around Miami. Because of the respect for this model, the National Hurricane Center shifted everything a little bit off towards the west. You'll also notice the center of it this time riding right along the center here of Florida. That would be bad news for Florida, but really good news for Georgia and South Carolina. It would mean there wouldn't be a secondary landfall here of this, but we would have this very strong storm moving across the entire peninsula. Now, because we like that model so much, they've adjusted that the forecast from the National Hurricane Center. That said, this is one model run from the European model, and we still will not say exactly where this is going to happen. But last time we were talking about something kind of moving right along here around Miami. Now we're talking about this moving in, cutting in across the Keys. This is very bad news for the Miami area, maybe a little bit better news up towards West Palm. But we're going to see some deviations on this over the next day or so. In fact, probably, unfortunately, all the way until Saturday. So everybody just has to keep watching. In the short term, Shep, Turks and Caicos about to get pummeled. What we just saw happen in Barbuda yesterday and the Lesser Antilles in the British Virgin Islands, that is about to happen to the Turks and Caicos with that exact same kind of force of this storm. Then it moves in towards the southern Bahamas before it makes that turn. I will also tell you the water, really warm. We've had this Category 5 now for the better part of 2 days, and it's been moving over warm water. But take a look at this. The darker colors you see here, that is even warmer temperatures. So there isn't any reason fuel-wise that we're going to see this storm weaken at all. Finally, Shep, one last thing I want to tell you. Yesterday, Irma went over the Leeward Islands here, Cat 5 hurricane. Take a look at Hurricane Jose now as of the last advisory. It's a major hurricane. That little white line there is what happened with Irma. Take a look at the cone here now for Jose. By Saturday, we might be talking about a second major hurricane landfall on these same islands here in about a 4 to 5 day period, which is unfathomable when you see the damage and pictures that have come out of there that they could be dealing with that again.
Yeah, a hurricane Category 3 behind a Category 5. Incredible. Yeah. Rick, we'll be right back to you. Something to think about now. If you've got friends who are on the west coast of Florida, remember this was one scenario. It's going to be bad over here, but not horrible. If they're right now, and we come up like this, that means Marco Island, Naples, Fort Myers, Estero, Cape Coral, up into Charlotte County, all of you could face hurricane force winds, everyone. So in Collier County, in Lee County, in Charlotte County, all along the west coast, and up into the Tampa Bay area, Sarasota and Tampa proper, in Venice and Port Charlotte. You have to listen to your local managers, your local warnings about this. This shift is going to mean changes for what happens in Bonita Springs and Naples and Estero, because this means more water, more winds, more storm. The worst part of a storm, the circular eye, counterclockwise, a low pressure center, the worst is always that upper right quadrant, right? But in this case, look at this storm. There's water all the way around it. There's the winds are the worst right here. The winds are the worst right here. But hurricane force winds extend out for 50 miles in all directions. And Rick, if it does what that European model says, that means they could get hurricane force winds all over the peninsula, at least at the lower half.
And actually, Shep, so the storm has grown in its size since yesterday. It's actually now the hurricane force winds extend out 70 miles from the center. So yeah, if Florida is anywhere from 90 to 100 miles or so across, and you have, if it cuts up the center of that, you have 70 miles out from the center on either side of it, a little bit more on the right-hand side of it. Then you could be talking about the entire peninsula, especially the southern half as it's moving on shore, getting hurricane force winds. Keep in mind also where if it makes landfall, say 150 mile an hour wind storm, it takes a while for that to wind down. So if it hit as a Category 1, maybe 6-7 hours later, it's a tropical storm. If it hits as a Cat 4, Cat 5, then it's going to take probably a good 12 to 18 hours for those winds to get down below hurricane force. So we could be watching a lot of the Florida peninsula getting those kinds of winds. Keep in mind, this is the forecast as of now. It has been going back and forth 20, 30 miles in either direction, and I think we'll see that happen again a few times over the next day.
Rick Reichmuth in the Extreme Weather Center. Thank you. We'll keep in touch with the Hurricane Center. We'll keep you updated. Bottom line, what you need to know now, if you're in an evacuation area, evacuate. If you're in an area anywhere on the peninsula of Florida, be ready.
Let's bring in Miami Beach Mayor Philip Levine. He joins us now on the phone. I can't imagine you must be doing everything possible to prepare for this storm. Miami Beach is on a barrier island. There are a lot of hotels there, a lot of people from out of town, and even sort of a smattering of construction as well.
Absolutely. And we've been taking all these precautions for the last 4 or 5 days, and everything from putting in portable pumps, portable generators, informing our residents, our visitors. We sent out a letter a day or so ago telling our visitors it's time to go home. And, of course, now we have the mandatory evacuation, and we're doing everything in our power to convince our residents and, of course, our visitors that they must leave Miami Beach. Shelters have been opened in Dade County. We're offering bus service to get them there and trolleys. And we're working, of course, with all our special groups, from folks with special needs to the elderly. And, of course, folks that have pets, we're letting them know that there are certain shelters that will allow you to bring your pets, so do not leave your pets at home.
Here's a question, sir. The governor has said that once the storm hits and folks have decided not to evacuate, they've decided to stay on, that it will be very, very difficult for first responders to get to them. But in that worst case scenario, what happens?
Well, what happens is this, is that once the storm actually starts to hit and we have hurricane force winds, our first responders will be bunkered down. What we don't want to do is jeopardize their lives, of course, at that period of time. They'll be available after the storm and before the storm, but when that storm is hitting, we don't want to cause the loss of lives of any of our first responders. That's why we're telling our residents, get out now. It's time to leave Miami Beach. The level of service will be reduced dramatically, and during the storm, there could be a situation where we have no service available to help anyone. We'll do the best we can, but we need people to understand that.
You mentioned that you're telling visitors, you need to get out. If you had a plan for a vacation, you're going to have to cut it short. But I imagine there's probably some people who are going to want to stay. They paid for the vacation, or maybe they want to witness a hurricane because it seems like it's not as dire, perhaps, when you watch it on TV. What's happening with the hotels? Have you been instructing them on what to do?
We sure have. We started a couple of days ago, and the hotels are working with us very closely, and they are making sure to the best of their ability that the guests vacate the rooms and get on their way. And, of course, we've been telling people, even before this evacuation order, time to move out. If you have friends, you have families, get off Miami Beach, because obviously we're concerned about the winds, but we're very concerned about the potential tidal surge and the flooding that would accompany that as well.
And Mayor Levine, speaking to that, the storm surge is supposedly, or the idea behind the pumps is that if there is a massive storm surge, those pumps are prepared to handle that. How well prepared are they?
Oh, absolutely not. That's a complete fallacy. The pumps that we put on the ground and the way we've raised our roads are to deal with sea level rise and, of course, moderate rains. There are no pumps possible that can handle a hurricane, let alone a hurricane of historic magnitude like Irma.
So in fact, that storm surge will just. So what happens if you see massive flooding?
Now, what will happen, of course, is that the pumps and those things will help to, over a period of time, reduce the amount of water on the roads. But once again, there's no pumping system that can match the power and awe of a hurricane, especially Irma, who's going to come, packing quite a punch. And as I've said it before, this is almost like a nuclear hurricane. It's that strong. And we want people to really heed our warnings and please get off the beach.
All right.
Mayor, were you living in the Miami area when Hurricane Andrew blew through?
Yes, I sure was. And what was fascinating about that, as you probably know, is we thought it was coming in one direction and it hit a different part of the city. So these are very unpredictable. As much as we have the science, a lot of it is speculation. We won't know until we know when the storm is here.
So better to prepare for the worst, leave if you can. And once again, a reminder, Miami Beach is an island. The only way to get off is on a bridge. And if something goes wrong with that bridge, you're going to be stuck.
Absolutely. No question about it. Now's the time to get out.
All right, Mayor Levine, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye now.
And tonight we wanted to take a few minutes in our coverage to have a conversation about the main concerns that are leading up to, during, and then after a storm like this.
We want to make sure you have all the information you need, of course, and that's why we have Chief Meteorologist Craig Setzer standing by, joining us as well. And it's not just about weathering the storm, it's also about what happens after the storm.
Right. So a lot of times when we have a hurricane impact here in South Florida, we think about just, you got to get through the storm, get your shutters up. Once the storm's gone, maybe, like in the Wilma situation, tarps. This is a much, much, much more serious event than that. The possibility of loss of roofs is possible on roofs of older homes. That is another reason why we want to have the house envelope protected. And that's where we put the shutters up to keep the glass from breaking, to keep the wind from getting inside of the house. Most of the newer homes have roof straps, so even if some wind gets in, the roof will stay on. But the older homes that don't have that and weren't retrofitted or upgraded, there's the potential for the wind taking off the roof.
Craig, I got a question from a viewer about roof turbines. What is
turbines,
that?
Yeah. So those little wind things, they're silver, they're about this big. They sit up on the top of the roof and they spin when the wind blows, and they help ventilate the attic and get some of the heat out. Unfortunately, when a hurricane is blowing, they spin super fast and they create different pressures in the attic. And then if they blow off, they allow rain to come in. So they make these covers, and tomorrow is a perfect day to get a ladder, get up on the roof, and put your wind turbine cover on your wind turbine.
Cover up your turbine. All right. We have some questions from some viewers. This is Danielle Wynn Clapper, who asked on Facebook, how long can we expect the worst of the storm? Will it be longer than some storms that we've experienced in the past?
Well, unfortunately, it is a much bigger storm than Andrew. The saving grace to South Florida at the time, and not to Homestead, of course, Country Walk, was the fact that it was a compact hurricane, so it marched through South Dade. But this is a much bigger storm, several times, 3 times bigger. And I just saw a message that the hurricane hunters are finding that the hurricane force winds are expanding outward, something we don't want to see for 2 reasons. One, it's going to up the surge potential, but also it means that we will be longer duration in the storm. It's possible we could be in hurricane force winds for 12 hours from before sunrise to after sunset. But of course, the worst part of the hurricane is the core, and that wouldn't last that long, fortunately. That may last 2 hours, maybe 3. But that's the part that does all of the damage, and that's the part that we really have to be most prepared for.
Wow. Another viewer was asking about the European model. Does it concern you about so much discrepancy in the European model?
Well, the European model has been doing very, very well. We keep statistics on how the model's doing each storm. I got a question earlier today, was that, why don't we just pick the spaghetti that's best? Every spaghetti has its day. It's just like some days a storm will do well with one model, other days a storm does well with another model. The European model is unique in that they use a lot more computing power, unfortunately, than the U.S. model, and they do a lot of calculations to get the atmosphere right before they forecast. And so it is doing better with this storm, and right now, unfortunately, that means that the storm is coming here if you buy that.
We've talked a little bit about this, about people who have been thinking about, on the fence, whether I should try to go. At what point is that question or that debate over? If you're still here at this point, you're not going anywhere.
Yeah, if you're still here Friday at sunset, you're not going anywhere. Everybody should be close to where they're going to be going sunset on Friday. You do not want to be on the road at all, caught in a traffic jam with a major hurricane coming up.
And a lot of people also have been asking about the turns. When is that spaghetti going to turn? Is it going to turn? Where is it going to go? Obviously, we know you can't predict that completely, but we did see that with Matthew last year when it made the kind of that last-minute turn away from us. We all had that big sigh of relief.
Right. Unfortunately, this one, all of the turns kind of cover some part of South Florida, and because it's a big storm, we'd still feel the impact. The turn also, probably more unfortunately, is it's not going to happen until probably Saturday afternoon or Saturday night. So the storm's just about here, and then it turns almost like it's taking aim at us, and that's going to be pretty terrifying.
That was the scenario we didn't want. We were hoping for that turn sooner.
Right, we're hoping for the turn sooner
or later.
Or later, yeah.
And it would have missed us on the other side.
Right.
Wow, it really is just a lot to wrap our heads around, and we've been talking so much about trying to sort of take care of everything that you need to do logistically, but also sort of take care of yourself emotionally, because this gets very, very stressful. A lot of people here in our newsroom a little bit stressed out about what's going to happen, and so how do we deal with that?
And to include your children in this too, and kind of keep some family cohesion. I mean, and for me, I've been looking at models, looking at numbers, and we've been talking about this since last Thursday. I just noticed that the reality of what's unfolding is starting to sink in. And so I'm like, ooh. And so I kind of almost had to just pause for a second, because when you're insulated like this, getting ready, doing all these busy things, now the fact that, in fact, it is coming here is starting to settle in and sink in. And so the people who still have hope that this is going to suddenly dodge us, that's not going to happen. We're going to feel some impact. How bad the impact is still questionable, because we don't know exactly where that core is going to go.
Well, especially for you, you've been living, eating, breathing this storm already for days now, and keeping everyone informed and really giving the community all the information they need to know.
You know what? And as we started last Friday and Saturday and over the weekend, I was thinking and putting out there, no surprises. Nobody should be surprised if there's a hurricane threat here, and nobody afterwards should say, I didn't expect it.
And you talk about children. I have grown children, and they're starting to act like children right now. This is affecting everybody, like you say. Thanks, Craig.